I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. As many of us are preparing for the holidays ahead, it's impossible to ignore our less fortunate brothers and sisters living around us in misery. They're homeless, they're on our streets, and many, certainly not all, but many have significant mental health problems, and they're not getting treatment. But there is something happening that offers a bit of hope for all of us, and that is our big story. The tricky question, of course, is how to get people with mental illness the help that they need if, in their mental illness, they're convinced they don't need help. It's tricky because you're talking about the most precious thing any of us has, control over our own bodies. It's a carefully protected right, but right now, it's so protected, it often seems impossible to do anything for those folks, and so they continue to live on our streets. Our Evan Watson has shown us how many in the mental health field now believe the bar has been raised a bit too high, that it should be easier to force people to accept help. And the hopeful part of all this, the justice system is beginning to come around in Oregon. Here's Evan Watson with the details on Oregon's new civil commitment work group.
Terry Archuletta's sister Deanna died this fall. She lived with bipolar disorder. Archuletta says her sister's mental health had deteriorated in combination with addiction. She wouldn't agree to treatment or stay on her medication.
She was found in her tent in a camp by herself. And that's the hardest part because you always think you're going to have, I'm sorry if you always think you're going to have another chance or more time. And I wish I would have had somewhere to just take her. Because I think on that last day that she was here, if I'd had a place to take her to get sober and be on her meds again, I do believe she would be alive right now.
Archuletta shared these photos of her sister, who was 61 when she died. She prefers to remember her from when they were younger. She wishes her sister had been mandated treatment and supervised medical care.
To really get someone to where they felt strong enough. I mean, and I don't know if it wouldn't solve everyone's problem. I know that. But I know it would have helped my sister to have lived longer.
Archuletta isn't alone. There's a growing public awareness that something needs to change. Now, state leaders around Oregon, from lawmakers to judges to doctors and mental health experts, are taking an in-depth look at civil commitment. The group plans to meet each month for the next 2 years to research, discuss, and craft changes to the Oregon standards for civil commitment and forced mental health care. Multnomah County Judge Nan Waller is part of the group, which was organized by the Oregon Judicial Department. She says the group is reevaluating the entire statute to create systemic change.
I think because we are seeing so many people who are struggling, we see that on the streets, it's covered by the press a lot. People have a lot of personal experience with it. It seemed like the right time for the judicial branch to step up and say, we will try to convene a group that hopefully can come up with some agreements and some better ways of doing this.
Waller says she hopes Oregon builds a system where people have access to better treatment and receive treatment precisely when they need it. The plan is to take 2 years to develop a report that could change Oregon's commitment standards. When asked why not sooner, Waller said this topic and finding consensus is complicated, especially when considering civil commitment.
These are complicated subjects where people have strong positions. And in order to come to consensus on any change, I think that it is going to take time and full examination. Trying to do a little bit of change along the way. We want to take a look at the whole system because our concern is that small changes are not going to end up with the results that the community and individuals who have serious mental illness need.
This focus on civil commitment has gained steam in recent months, illustrating a change in perspective. Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler recently told business owners he would support a hard look at the legislative level of our involuntary commitment laws, saying people need help and compassion, especially when they're homeless after refusing recommended treatment. Currently, the work group is reviewing civil commitment standards in other states to see if they would adopt something that works better.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts about this story and the civil commitment process. The woman we featured, by the way, at the beginning of that story actually wrote to us after one of our last Uncommitted segments, and that's how she connected with Evan Watson to share her story about her sister. Thanks for doing that, Terry. Let us know your thoughts. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. And now to a story that highlights a different kind of cycle in our area, and it's a cycle just as dangerous as the gaps in the civil commitment process. This involves the criminal justice system. This time it involves someone accused of a violent assault getting released from custody after just a few days, only to then allegedly terrify a family sitting down for dinner by trying to break into their home. It was caught on camera. We have to say allegedly for legal reasons, but it's on camera. Here's Kyla Boshi with the story.
December 8th, 6:43 p.m., an 18-year-old man smashed the glass window of a family's front door in northwest Portland. The homeowner, who was inside having dinner with the couple's 12 and 14-year-old sons, claims the attacker used a post from their wrought iron fence as a weapon.
There was no thought. There was no nothing. He pulled apart our fence, walked right up, and immediately started smashing the window.
Police arrested 18-year-old Joseph Ibrahim. He's in jail, facing a felony charge of criminal mischief. And now we're learning the suspect had been released from jail just 3 days earlier. On December 2nd, the same man allegedly hit this woman in the back of the head in downtown Portland.
It was a lights-out moment.
The victim said she was walking near the corner of Southwest 11th and Alder Street when the suspect struck her from behind using a bag filled with a sleeping roll and heavy metal lantern.
So this was not a random, let's bop her on the head and keep on going, we're having fun. He wanted to hurt me. And I consider myself lucky to be here today.
Police arrested Ibrahim on misdemeanor charges on a Friday, but he was released the following Monday. Court records indicate at the time he had no criminal history. Victims in both cases suggest the city needs to address ongoing issues of homelessness, drugs, and crime.
The situation in Portland is unacceptable and has been for years.
Court records suggest Ibrahim, who's listed as homeless, admitted to police he'd been smoking methamphetamine, and he giggled about how scared the victim was. Kyla Boshi, KGW News.
Moving on now to elections. Oregon's second elections director in 2 years is calling it quits. Deborah Scroggins joined the Secretary of State's office in 2020 after a 3-month search. The last director was fired by Bev Clarno, the Secretary of State at the time, after he pointed out problems with the state's aging elections equipment. Today I asked Oregon Governor Kate Brown about the resignation, which she said is a question for the Secretary of State. But then, as governor and as a former Secretary of State herself, she talked about the job of elections director.
I will say that overseeing elections, particularly now after the Trump administration and his efforts to, frankly, provide false information to Americans about the integrity of our voting systems, being in elections is an incredibly tough job right now. Secretaries of State across the nation have gotten death threats. It is absolutely unacceptable. By any measure, by any account, America, and particularly Oregon, has one of the most safe and secure voting systems in the entire world.
And let me just correct something I said there. Deborah Scroggins actually was appointed in 2021. Now, I asked the governor if there's a systemic problem with the elections position right now. Governor Brown said no, it's just a super tough job. And that's pretty much what the resigning elections director said in her letter. Here's the letter. Scroggins wrote, "We are at an extraordinarily challenging time for election officials. Mis- and disinformation have made the work of administering elections extremely challenging." And by the way, I thought it was sort of interesting that at the bottom she wrote, "Best of luck," which to me sort of sounds like best of luck, friends, but I am out of here. Late last week, Oregon Secretary of State Shemia Fagan talked with state lawmakers about elections. She wants to add 4 new positions to her office, and she's asking for the funding now. Fagan said her office tracked 220 incidents of false information related to elections this past year. She also described for lawmakers the way that some members of the public are apparently trying to overwhelm local elections offices with public records requests.
The flood of public records requests that are highly technical, that take a large amount of time to actually work through what the person is even asking for, And then often when the clerk, which sometimes is one clerk, like in Lake County, one person that works in this elections office, by the time they often get back to the people and say, okay, here's what we actually have, these things don't apply to Oregon, here's what we can actually give you, it will cost, $92 or $104 for our staff time. The person then disappears and then comes back with a new request that they cut and paste it off of some national website, and then a cycle just continues and is incredibly, incredibly time consuming. And this is duplicated across all 36 counties.
Fagan wants her office to handle all those public records requests to ease the strain on local election workers. Now to our homeless crisis. Many homeless people rely on returning empty bottles and cans as a form of income. It's known as canning. But as of last week, some stores on Portland's Central East Side have stopped accepting the cans because of safety concerns, even though state law says they have to take them. Blair Best has our story.
It's almost like a drill.
I make more money an hour than most people do in pretty good jobs.
One Larry Smith has down to a science.
Well, I go out and get the cans at night. Usually about 4 or 5 hours it took us to get these right here.
He's a military vet and lives in transitional housing. Canning, for him, is a full-time job.
Approximately $300 worth.
What do you use that $300 on?
First, I start every day at $110 in the hole because that's how much my hotel bill is. My girlfriend has cancer right now, so I'm working with that as well. We use it for food. We use it for cigarettes because we smoke. We have habits too, just like everybody else. And we use it for gas. My car, my truck.
For many like Larry, the People's Depot under the Morrison Bridge is the only reliable place to return bottles as of late, since nearby stores in Portland's Central East Side district are either limiting bottle return services or no longer accepting them.
I think they discriminate against people. Like Safeway and Fred Meyer's, they shut down totally. They can only give you $2.40. I used to take all my cans to Safeway.
I don't like dealing with the stores. It's always hit and miss.
Market of Choice here off Southeast Belmont is one of the places no longer accepting returnables. Now, those working inside wouldn't go on camera, but tell us that homeless people returning bottles have assaulted their staff, and they've had to call police numerous times.
A lot of these folks out here, they don't know how to react with words. They only know one way to react, and that is by violence.
Refusing to accept returnables goes against Oregon law. According to the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, businesses could face daily fines up to $500. Those at Market of Choice are aware of the penalties and are trying to find a way to both comply and keep their staff safe.
I don't understand what the safety concerns are. Like we've been under here for close to 3 years, so we've never had the cops come here. We've never had any major fights break out.
For those at People's Depot, they'll continue to provide the lifeline many homeless people rely on, one can at a time.
Everyone is very respectful, if you can't tell. Everyone tends to respect what we do, and we're become a pillar in the community.
In Central East Side, Blair Best, KGW News.
And those of you who watch the story every night, and by the way, thank you for doing that, you know that Blair gives us special behind-the-scenes access to her stories, filling us in on things that she was not able to get into her main story that you just saw, and trying to help us better understand the feel of the environment when she's out there on the street reporting. Here's a look at what happened today.
Hey Pat, just one thing I wanted to add to this story. You can see the line of people waiting to drop off bottles there behind me. The people actually accepting the bottles offer some of the homeless people jobs on the spot if they have the availability. Some of the people accepting the bottles actually used to be homeless, and they told me that it wasn't until they were dropping off bottles one day and they got offered a job to work this line right here that their life turned around and they were able to get their feet back underneath them. As for the atmosphere here today, I won't lie, it's a little tense. We even got yelled at a few times from some of the people waiting in line just for shooting video. So I do kind of get what these stores are saying. I'm not quite sure what it is about dropping off bottles that makes people so hostile. But that being said, this place to drop off bottles seems to have a better working relationship with the homeless. They seem to feel more accepted here as opposed to going to a big grocery store or a convenience store, and I think that's why this place has been so successful for several years, and they've never had to call police and they've never had any issues.
Still to come on The Story.
A machine recount will soon be underway in Washington's 3rd Congressional District, where Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez defeated Republican Joe Kent. The results do not meet the state threshold for an automatic recount, meaning Kent's campaign has to pay for it. But how much is he going to have to fork over? And how does the state even calculate that? And finally, will it even matter? A brief history of recounts in the state of Washington to see what history can teach us. That's coming up when the story returns. Tomorrow, the canvassing board in Clark County, that's the formal body that works to certify the results of county elections. The canvassing board is going to meet to direct the elections office to start a machine recount of the 3rd Congressional District race. Now, that race pitted Democrat Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez against Republican Joe Kent. This recount will affect all 7 counties that make up the 3rd Congressional District, so each of the counties will have to get the process going in the coming days. We're just telling you about Clark County tonight since they're kicking things off tomorrow. And it's happening all because Joe Kent's campaign requested a machine recount in this race, and because the results did not meet the threshold for an automatic recount. Now, Kent's team has to pay for it, by the way, and it's going to cost almost $50,000. We are going to get into the nitty-gritty of what exactly a machine recount is, so if you like that kind of stuff, you're going to love this. And a machine recount is not necessarily what you think. That title brings a specific way that they do it. You might be imagining machines counting every single ballot over again. Well, that's not quite right. What they do is review all of the undervotes that are cast. What's that, you say? You don't know what an undervote is? Don't worry about it. I didn't either. But it is important to know now. An undervote is when a voter does not make any choice in a specific race. So, for example, if you have 2 races on the ballot, but you only vote for the top race and then you ignore the second race, the race that you did not vote for would be considered an undervote. Now, this machine recount will simply be a review of all of the undervotes for the 3rd Congressional District race, meaning all the voters who did not choose a candidate in that congressional race. Those ballots will be double-checked to make sure the machine didn't somehow miss a marking that someone may have put there for the race that wasn't tallied the first time around. I hope you're following all this. So, unless the margin between the candidates is fairly close, a machine recount is really not all that likely to change the outcome of the election. Let's look at the margin in this race, for example. The difference between Gluesenkamp-Perez and Kent is 0.83%. That's pretty tiny. It accounts for about 2,600 votes. By the way, the write-in candidates in this race pulled in more than 0.5%, and that's about 1,700 votes. Now, that has nothing to do with this story, but it is a fun fact, and we thought that you should have it. Impress your neighbors with that one. But remember, the difference line, we're coming back to that in just a moment. Some counties actually include undervotes in their data, and in the 3rd Congressional District, the only county that does is Clark County. So we know that they had 2,400 undervotes for this race. But the likelihood of all of those undervotes actually being votes that were missed by the machine and in favor of Joe Kent is astronomically slim, if not just outright impossible. Plus, he'd have to pick up just about every single undervote in all 6 other counties to win. It's kind of an uphill battle. We're not saying he won't, but not likely at all. According to the state law, the race was not close enough for an automatic recount, but Kent's campaign is well within its right to request one, as long as they pay for it. Now, you might be wondering, how does the state know how much to charge a candidate who wants to pay for their own recount? Well, excellent question. They charge per vote. And it's not per undervote that's being counted again. Oh, no. They charge for every vote that was cast in that election. So in this case, we're talking about 324,000 ballots in the entire 3rd district that were cast, including ballots that did not choose a candidate in the 3rd district. The state charges campaigns 15 cents per ballot. So Kent's bill for the recount, it's going to be just shy of $49,000. Now, to be clear, Joe Kent and his team were adamant throughout their campaign that they would support an audit of this race after its completion, win or lose. They also told us several times they would accept the result of the election, win or lose. And as we explained, requesting this recount is perfectly legal, and maybe that's the audit that they were talking about. But let's be honest, this is definitely a last-ditch effort, and it's likely a last-ditch effort that's going to fail. And that's not an opinion of mine. That's what history has told us. In 125 recounts of the general election results in the state of Washington between 2007 and 2021, the outcome of a race has changed just 3 times. And there's a caveat to that. In those 3 races, the outcome did change. Those races were all municipal elections where the margin between the candidate was 3 votes or less. Not 2,600 like the margin that Kent faces against Gluesenkamp-Perez. But nonetheless, we will be watching, and as soon as the machine recount results come in for the entire 3rd Congressional District, we will bring you those final numbers. Up next on the story, we feel like we say this every Monday, but it was a busy weekend around town, and if you unplugged for a few days, we understand, and now we've got you covered with a recap of what you missed when the story returns.
Police spent the better part of Saturday investigating in this northeast Portland neighborhood after a call came in just before 9 a.m. What officers found when they arrived here was 2 people dead in a home. Crime tape and patrol cars surrounded this house on the corner of Northeast 37th and Alameda Street. As detectives and officers went in and out of the home, neighbors mingled near the scene, curious and concerned. Investigators found the bodies of a man and a woman shot and killed, but said they aren't seeking out any suspects.
Downtown businesses hope for the best this holiday season. It's been a struggle in recent years in downtown Portland. The Portland Business Alliance reported to the Oregonian that foot traffic downtown is about 60% of what it was in 2019. The Portland Business Alliance's Clean and Safe program sponsors pop-up shops downtown, like Matisse on Southwest Morrison. Matisse features handmade rugs from Mexico.
It's been a great experience to actually have my own pop-up space. I've been doing markets ever since I started Matisse, and it's nice to take a step back and relax and actually be in a heated space and be able to expose the city with our designs here.
Forever. It was like, I don't know, way too long.
That's how Kyle describes the past 2 years he's been living on Portland streets. Most recently, fighting to stay warm here on the corner of Southeast 6th Ave and Oak.
Little fire or like burn hand sanitizer or like alcohol or like propane.
The fire department has responded to his fires 4 times in the last week.
Yeah, they know me pretty well, I guess. I don't know.
This area also the latest target for city crews clearing homeless camps. It's all part of the mayor's Central East Side 90-day reset plan to clean up the neighborhood and increase police patrols after dozens of business owners called on the mayor for help about 2 weeks ago, citing safety concerns.
One of our employees on his way into our central kitchen was held up at gunpoint.
Like everyone in this room, we deal daily with feces, human, on our shoes. We deal with break-ins. We deal with assaults.
So that was just a sampling of the stories over the weekend. If you want to watch the full version of any of those stories, we've got them up right now at kgw.com and on our KGW YouTube page. If you missed any of our coverage here on The Story, not to worry. We have a free newsletter where you can get all caught up on our biggest stories of the week. Just scan this QR code there on your screen right now using your cell phone's camera. It'll take you to a link to sign up. The newsletter comes to your email at the beginning of every week. Keep sending your questions and comments, by the way, to our email. The address is thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. That's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. I'm taking the day off tomorrow, but I'll be back on Wednesday. And remember, in the meantime, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I hope you'll join the team tomorrow for the show, and I'll see you on